Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Senator, we're going to get to do political strategy today on the show, which I actually love. So this is like one of my favorites because of the insanity in a race that actually matters for control of the Senate. We're going to dive into that. Plus, Jill Biden's on like this rewrite history tour as well.
Well, we're going to cover the continued fiery crash of the Nazi communist in Maine, Graham Plattner. It seems every day when you think there cannot be anything worse about this guy, there are no more skeletons in the closet. It turns out that closet is, in fact, a cemetery. It is a graveyard, and there are so many skeletons there. There are more to come. We're going to break down why they're coming right now so quickly, and is something sinister afoot. We're going to break that down in detail. We're also going to talk to you about a shocking story about UNRWA, the UN relief agency that has employed hundreds and maybe even thousands of Hamas terrorists. New breaking news there that is going to make you didn't think well of the United Nations when you started listening to this podcast. I promise you at the end of it, you're going to think even worse. You know what? It occurs to me now, Graham Plattner would make a fantastic employee at UNRWA. He would fit right in.
Amen.
They would understand his anti-American leftist vitriol. It would be a perfect mesh. And then there's Jill Biden. Jill Biden is going on TV and just kind of crashing and burning. Just she's trying to defend her husband. She is failing miserably in that. And at the end of the day, what she's doing, I don't think she intends to, but she is indicting the entire Democrat Party and all of the media for being willing, enthusiastic, partisan liars. We're going to bring you all of that today.
Yeah, it really is an incredible story. We've got the receipts for you with the audio. Let me also talk to you for a moment about the incredible work that's being done right now by Americans United for Life and how you can get involved. For over the past 50 years, AUL has filed more than 200 legal briefs and helped create at least 400 pro-life bills in over 50 states. They're writing model legislation and consulting with the state legislators and defending their own laws and other pro-life statutes in court. Now, Americans United for Life has a dual front approach of not only writing, but then defending legislation. And it's proved an effective one that can become even more impactful as pro-life state legislatures are moving to enact protections for preborn babies after the downfall of Roe v. Wade. They're also protecting the mothers. And now they are also doing everything they can to fight on the legality of abortion that is returned to the states. And that's where you come in. You now have the opportunity to overturn pro-abortion laws and advance pro-life legislation that attacks the most vulnerable in our society, from the womb to the tomb. Together, we can shape the future of our nation through life-affirming legislation in every state. A gift of just $25 helps hold abortion providers accountable and helps protect women and unborn children across the country. And now through a match, your gift is doubled. You can donate securely at aul.org/verdict. That's aul.org/verdict. Sponsored by Americans United for Life. All right, Senator, so before we get into politics of political theory and how to run campaigns, we do have some even more breaking news on this disaster of a candidate. As you said, the skeletons keep coming out of the closet.
Well, the latest that just broke, here's how the Wall Street Journal covered it. Graham Plattner's wife flagged sexually explicit texts to his Senate campaign. The wife of the Maine Senate Democrat candidate last year told the campaign about texts she had found between Plattner and other women. And notice women is plural. Days after Graham Plattner announced his Maine Senate bid, his wife informed the campaign about a potential political problem she had previously discovered on the, quote, Oyster Farmer's phone. Boy, he's doing some oyster farming. Sexually explicit texts with several women, according to the people familiar with the matter. Amy Gertner, who married Plattner in 2023, told the campaign about messages she had found early in their marriage in the spring of 2025. So this is a guy who can stick with something. I mean, he lasted almost 18 months before he's caught sexually texting other women not his wife. In late August, as some aides were conducting opposition research on their own candidate, and by the way, that's a standard thing you do in politics, is when you are preparing to launch a campaign, one of the first things you do is hire your own team to do oppo research on you so that you know what they're going to come and attack you with. Gerstner disclosed the text to a campaign aide to make sure they didn't pose a risk to her husband's nascent campaign. The campaign had been preparing for a major rally over Labor Day weekend last year with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who likes to hang out with Nazi communists who are sexual harassers and cheating on their wives. That's not actually in the Journal story. That's just kind of reading between the lines. But who was, and this is getting back to the story, set to officially endorse Plattner at the event. Aides ultimately decided that the texts were a private matter. Let me read that again. Aides ultimately decided the texts were a private matter. You remember when that private matter, those sorts of private matters drove Eric Swalwell out of the California gubernatorial race?
Yes.
They're a private matter until they're not. That was being handled by the couple in marriage counseling, a campaign official said. The rally proceeded as planned with thousands in attendance. In a statement provided by Plattner's campaign, Gertner said she believed she was confiding in an aide she considered a friend. I know who Graham is. I know the man I married and the husband he has been to me in the best and worst days of my life. This hasn't changed and it won't. The previously unreported deliberations last year over sexually explicit text discovered on Plattner's phone come as the veteran has exploded onto the national political scenes, kindling Democratic hopes that they can unseat Republican Susan Collins and gain control of the Senate. All right, now that's bad.
Yeah.
But surely there couldn't be worse. Well, there is, and stop calling me Shirley. Also breaking, Graham Plattner has an active profile on a messaging app called, and I'm not making this up, Predator's Paradise.
Active profile, just so everybody understands what that means. That means like he's currently being used.
Yes. And if you read the Daily Wire, Graham Plattner, whose Senate campaign has been marred with scandal from the outset, maintains an active account on a platform notorious for enabling sexual predators. The Maine Democrat who's seeking to unseat incumbent Senator Susan Collins is a registered user on Kick, a Daily Wire review found. Now, Kick is already known as a hotbed for child pornography, kidnapping, and sexual abuse.
And by the way, to be clear, there was 4 months before apparently he joined a major expose, I think it was the New York Times, about what you just said and this site being used by these things. So if you Googled, you would know that you're about to join a site that is known for child pornography and other things like that. And it's like, oh, yeah, let's sign up for that 4 months after that massive expose came out.
You know, Ben, I will say this seriously. I'm beginning to wonder whether we're about to have something enter popular culture, which is a new euphemism of oyster farming. You know, what is my scoundrel husband doing? He's oyster farming. I mean, this guy has a potential to, like, set a term that is going to last well beyond the Maine Senate race. And if Saturday Night Live actually did comedy, they would have an entire skit on oyster farming.
Yes,
like it cries out for it. Yeah. And here's the bizarre thing. They just might. You know, I mentioned before Eric Swalwell. And let's talk a little strategy. Let's talk about why this information is coming out right now.
Because, by the way, it's not coming from Republicans. That's a point that, number one, we need to make. This is Democrats that were in his campaign who have now outed him publicly on this. And this goes back to compare and contrast Eric Swalwell. When Democrats thought Eric Swalwell was no longer useful, they're the ones that released all the info to destroy him, not Republicans going after him. Let's be clear. We're seeing this now play out as deja vu weeks later.
Yeah, look, there's a real-time parallel. And if you look at it, this story that Plattner's wife came with these sexually explicit texts to the campaign staff. You know who knew about that? The campaign staff.
Yep. That's
the source of this story in all likelihood. And so you've got Democrats going after their own nominee. And it is reminiscent of, look, Eric Swalwell I didn't know the guy, but from everything that has been said, it was widely known among his colleagues that the guy was a complete predator, that the guy was sexually harassing, sexually assaulting women, was out partying, was like Bluto in Animal House, living his life. And Democrats,
they didn't care.
They didn't care at all. Because he was an attack dog, and so he could be a sexual predator. If he's attacking Donald Trump, they're happy with whatever he's doing. They didn't care until they realized they had a problem in the California gubernatorial race. And by the way, look, Swalwell, it appears that other House members knew. There may be some Democrat senators right now who knew when they were in the House with him. There were lots and lots of staffers who knew. There presumably were reporters who knew, because these reporters and members and staffers are all very tight with each other. And they all kept it silent until the instant there was a political benefit to getting rid of him, and boom, it was a matter of hours and he was gone. I got to say, when the story was just that Plattner was a communist, Democrats were fine. Bernie Sanders campaigned with him. Elizabeth Warren said, he's my guy. When the story was just he was a communist with a Nazi tattoo of a Totenkopf, the symbol of the SS they used on the death camps, amazingly, Democrats were fine. They went out and campaigned with him, said, I'm proud to stand with him. That's who they were. But as the stories got worse and worse and worse, you do have to wonder, who is it that's trying to push Plattner out? Is it Republicans trying to smack him in the general election? Or is it instead Democrats who want to jettison him? And in particular, if you look at the Maine law, under Maine law, a candidate who wins the June 9th primary and subsequently withdraws by 5 p.m. on July 13th. So there's a narrow window. We have just over a month.
By the way, make sure you mark your calendar for that date. That date matters.
July 13th may be replaced by a nominee selected by party officials. Any replacement candidate must be chosen no later than 5 p.m. on July 27th. The timeline would give Democrats just 14 days to settle on a replacement candidate and prepare for the general election campaign. So, I doubt Plattner is on board with this, but by the way, Swalwell wasn't on board with his defenestration. I mean, he was forcibly ejected and did not have a vote in the matter. I am quite sure Plattner is not liking his oyster farming being exposed to all of Maine and all of this country. But you have at least some Democrats who are saying, gosh, this guy's becoming a liability. And listen, these guys are ruthless. I think we need to be quite aware that this could well be a Democrat-on-Democrat violence effort to remove Plattner, and that their objective is to get Plattner to withdraw by July 13th.
Yeah. It's you look at just how quick this came out, and Democrats are really good at planning stories and building momentum. It's exactly the playbook they did with Swalwell. Yep. By the way, it's also what Democrats did to Bernie Sanders when they were making sure he didn't get the nomination. If you go back, there's some parallels here when they're like, we're not going to support you. We're going to pull the funding. We're going to pull our everybody from you, and they will destroy you. I mean, this is a party that they always decide who their guy is, and if they don't like you, and that included Bernie Sanders when he was running for president, they were going to make sure he didn't get anywhere close to the nomination. Now you look at it this way, and I wonder this question, Senator. Did Republicans maybe misplay this a little bit because there was such shocking news that then we started pushing out there? Should we have looked at that date earlier on and been like, maybe we should just be quiet for a while, and then on the 13th, that's when we hammer his candidacy?
Look, I will say this. Chuck Schumer and Democrat leadership wanted a different candidate. Yeah. Schumer recruited to the race Janet Mills, the Democrat governor, from sort of traditional Washington playbook. She was by far the most attractive Democrat candidate. Yes. The problem is the base of the Democrat Party today is bat crap crazy. They've lost their ever-loving mind. And so a safe and somewhat boring choice of a sitting Democrat governor, that was far less interesting than a Nazi communist. That's where their base is. Like, understand, being a Nazi communist is not a negative in the Democrat Party today. It is a plus, because the people who are fueling these campaigns are themselves self-described communists, and far too many of them are Nazi communists.
Yeah,
that dynamic. Yes, very much so.
Well, and the Democratic Party now has become, as a party, very much anti-Semitic. I mean, nationwide, we're seeing activists and candidates and leaders who truly hate Jewish people, whether they're in Israel or in the United States of America or anywhere else in the world. That's become norm for them.
So it would not surprise me at all if this is Chuck Schumer and Chuck Schumer's minions planting these stories, because he wanted a different candidate, and I think they see blood in the water, and they're going after Plattner. I will say this entire episode has revealed how utterly and completely morally bankrupt the Democrat Party is. Because as every one of these stories broke, no Democrat senator abandoned him. The only one who did was John Fetterman, and Fetterman, to his credit, did the right thing. But that makes the other 46 look all the more hypocritical. Because
and he's still got big name people coming to stand on stage with him. Like, that's what's incredible. Like, he's not canceling campaign events, but you actually have what I would refer to as your top 1% list of Democratic lawmakers that you want to be seen on stage with if you're running a Democratic campaign. It's the equivalent of having you, Senator, go to a Republican campaign. Like, it's on the short list of people you want to campaign with. They're not backing out of standing by him so far.
Just today, I saw a tweet from Ro Khanna, the very, very rich, very, very liberal Democrat from Silicon Valley, member of Congress. And he said how proud he is to be going to Maine to campaign with Graham Plattner. This is where their base is. And by the way, these people don't care that the guy's misogynist, that he's racist, that he's anti-Semitic. They don't care that he has said that he wished that fellow veterans died, and they don't care that he's now a registered user on a site that is filled with sexual predators and child pornography. None of that matters. He's on their team, so they stick with him no matter what. And by the way, I'll draw a contrast because, some might say, oh, come on, both sides do that. Well, no, that's not true. If you remember back a few cycles ago when Roy Moore was the nominee in Alabama, the Republican nominee. Yeah. And once he was the nominee, many of us were willing to support him. And then the stories came out about serious, credible allegations of his engaging in sexual assault of underage girls. And I and a number of other people, his answers were thoroughly unsatisfactory. He could not conclusively respond to those allegations. And I and a number of others said, all right, we're done. Now, it resulted in a Democrat winning that seat. So that was, from a partisan perspective, not a good thing. But are there no Democrats that they're fond of a phrase of country over party? Does any Democrat actually believe country over party, or are they just willing to do anything in pursuit of power?
Yeah, it's a great question. Final one on this. If you are Susan Collins right now looking at this, I think it's pretty clear that you'd want to run against this guy, Plattner. You that much better person for you to run against than, let's say, they do a replacement. Is she looking at the 13th date and saying, please let us get there as fast as we can with this guy?
Look, I don't know. I haven't talked to Susan about that, but the speed with which it's coming out, and the source of it, that it is Democrats who are going after this guy, raises very real suspicions that there are at least some in the party, and I suspect Schumer is front and center, who have decided let's cut our losses with this guy and throw him overboard. And historically,
what's your prediction?
The Democrats
you think
have been
they'll
really
do it
good
before
at
the 13th? You think they will?
I think there's a very good chance.
I want to move to UNRWA right now, and we've talked about UNRWA on this show before, but we have new news on this, and I want to get the headline for people so they understand just how big of an issue this is, even if it's not being covered by the media. That's why we did a show. The Washington Free Beacon came out with an article. It says, exclusive, U.S. probe of embattled UN Gaza Relief Agency now expands to 1,500 plus staffers suspected with direct ties to Hamas. Now, that would be direct ties to a terrorist organization. Senator, we've been warning about this for a long time. There's the president's talked about how worthless in many ways the United Nations can be, certainly in the Middle East. This is another example of this. We know that Hamas had worked with the United Nations people on the ground. Food had been stolen. Countless dollars of aid had been stolen and given to terrorists. And now you see the compromising of UN staff of up to 1,500 plus people. I wish I could say I'm surprised by this. I am not. But what does this story say about what America's role should be moving forward?
Look, for a long time, I've called for UNRWA to be completely defunded, to be shut down. UNRWA is so bad, it makes the UN itself seem like a pro-America, fantastic organization with integrity. UNRWA is part of the UN, but it is the most corrupt part. Here's what was reported in the story by Adam Credo. The federal investigation into staff at the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the UN Gaza Relief Organization that's been closely linked to Hamas, will soon encompass at least 1,500 UNRWA-linked individuals suspected of terror ties. This unprecedented dragnet, reported here for the first time by the Washington Free Beacon, exposes an aid group brimming with Hamas operatives and is generating momentum in Congress and the Trump administration for harsher sanctions on the embattled aid group, according to congressional staffers briefed on the matter. The punitive matters up for consideration include stripping UNRWA of its diplomatic immunity under U.S. law, which would open it up to legal action from terror victims, and fully designating the aid organization as a foreign terrorist organization, according to 3 Trump administration officials and other sources tracking the matter in Congress. These discussions have accelerated since the Free Beacon first reported in April that UNRWA and other UN agencies are stonewalling a federal probe into their ties to Hamas. The U.S. Agency for International Development, Inspector General's Office, a law enforcement agency separate from the largely defunct USAID, has spent months independently unearthing evidence that multiple UNRWA employees participated in Hamas's October 7th terror attack. Let me repeat that again. Multiple UNRWA employees participated in Hamas's October 7th terror attack. The probe will soon expand to at least 1,500 suspected militants with UNRWA ties. The article continues. Senators Ted Cruz and Bill Hagerty, influential members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, nice of them to say that, both told the Free Beacon, well, I mean, they could have said, lousy members.
Yeah, because those 2 random guys in the Senate,
it could have been worse. 2 guys we ran into on the street, so that's nice of them to say. Both told the Free Beacon that it's time to move beyond merely freezing UNRWA's funding, particularly as the USAID Inspector General continues to unearth evidence of Hamas complicity. Quote, either they come clean, or I expect growing momentum for designating them for the support they give to terrorists, Cruz said. Hagerty called it, quote, appalling that the other UN agencies today are still stonewalling the Trump administration's ongoing investigations, adding that, quote, if UN agencies refuse to show basic transparency and accountability, then the executive branch and Congress must respond appropriately. That's a big deal, and it's a big deal that both the UN and UNRWA in particular are still stonewalling and refusing to accept any accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, it is. One other thing on this is the fact that it's so widespread. There is no way that the United Nations didn't know about this. There was no way that UNRWA and the leadership didn't know about this. And we're not talking about 15. We're talking about more than 1,500 with direct ties to terrorist organization. What does that say about the president's standpoint on not just UNRWA, but also on the UN in general? Because I don't believe for a moment that the UN doesn't know this.
Well, let's talk about how pervasive it is. So Ben, how many employees do you think there are at UNRWA?
That's a great question. I have no clue. I mean, I'd say 10,000 just because it's a bloated agency.
Yeah, I had no idea. And so as we were preparing for the pod, I pulled out my Google and I typed in, how many staff are there at UNRWA? And Google came back and said there are approximately 30,000 staff at UNRWA. We now have an investigation into more than 1,500 of them for direct ties to Hamas. That's 5% of the agency.
Yeah.
That's not one isolated person. 1,500 out of 30,000 suspected of being Hamas terrorists or directly linked to Hamas terrorists. That is a big damn deal. That is an agency that needs to shut down, needs to be padlocked, needs to be ended. The idea that the United Nations, much less the United States, would be providing funding that's going directly to Hamas terrorists, that is insanity. It needs to stop.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I want to move finally on to Jill Biden, and you want to talk about a dumpster fire of interviews. Jill Biden's out there. I was like, is she, I literally was searching. I'm like, is she promoting a book? Did she write an autobiography? She's out there doing all these interviews, trying to rewrite history, but also wants you to feel sorry for her and her husband, saying that his bad night, she was terrified he was having a stroke. The only problem is, after she thought he may be having a stroke in that debate with Donald Trump, she had no problem taking him to a campaign event and then to a Waffle House and said on TV with him standing there, I'm so proud of you. You did such a great job tonight. It's either, I'm like, all right, well, it's either senior abuse or you're a pathological liar or both.
Well, you and I did an emergency podcast the night of that debate. We did it immediately as the debate concluded, and we told Verdict listeners at the time, you've just watched the single most consequential presidential debate in American history. And the reason is, and you and I predicted that night as the debate ended, this debate will change the names on the ballot in November. This debate was such a disaster, such a train wreck. The Democrats will do what we're worried they're going to do with Graham Plattner, which is pull him off and put someone else on. The Democrats are really, Republicans are lousy at this, by the way. Republicans almost never manage to do this. The Democrats are ruthlessly efficient. And we saw that debate. We saw it went badly, but it turns out apparently Jill Biden thought it went even worse than we did. Give a listen to what she said she thought when she was watching the debate.
Were you horrified as you saw it unfold?
I wasn't horrified. I was frightened because I had never, ever seen Joe like that before or since. Never.
Or since?
Yes. Or
You've
since.
never seen him like
Never.
that?
No.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Senator, if you think that your spouse is having a stroke, A, why would you leave him on stage? B, why would you then take him to a campaign event afterwards? And C, why would you then go to Waffle House and send it to a doctor? And D, if this is the worst it ever was and the whole world saw that exact moment, it's never been anywhere close before or after, you're either a pathological liar, A, or B, you're either a pathological liar who's crazy. You pick which one you want to be.
Look, Ben, this is an area where I think the American people have a great sense of intuition of judging whether someone's speaking the truth or lying. You asked the right question. What would you do if you believed your spouse of many decades, was having a stroke? And the answer every one of us would give, the answer you would give, the answer I would give, the answer everyone would give, is you take your spouse to the hospital immediately.
Regardless of what they're doing. Regardless of what they're doing.
If you think they're having a stroke. And look, maybe you don't rush out and pull them off national TV. I don't know about that, but at a minimum. So suppose you just you're scared, but you don't. As soon as it was over, how do you not say, we're going to the emergency room? Yeah. We're going to go, okay, you don't want a big public brouhaha? All right, get a doctor. When you're watching it, he's having a stroke, get a doctor here right now. The instant he steps off stage, I want him being examined. Like that, anyone who is watching their spouse and thinks they're having a stroke would do that. She didn't do that. She went to the campaign party. She cheered and celebrated. I'm actually not critical like you're giving. You're giving harsh criticism because she said he did great. Look, she's a campaign spouse. Every campaign spouse is going to say that. I'm understanding of that. If I do a terrible job at a debate, I don't really want Heidi to go, "Wow, he really crapped the bed," like that.
I understand that, but my point is the pathological lying aspect of this. I don't believe for a second that she's telling the truth, and she says it's the worst it's ever been. It only happened that one time. It happened to be the 1.5 hours that was on national television during a presidential debate. I don't believe her, number one. And number two, if you are, Senator, let's go to debate night with you. If I thought as one of your friends that you're having a stroke and you could make it till the end, I would immediately do what you just said, and I'm not your spouse, and I think your team would. But second of all, I think you'd also, if you thought there was a medical issue there, you probably would actually let people know, because they did. Remember, they made up an excuse. They lied and said he had a cold. Like, if you thought something was bad, that's your alibi to get out of a terrible debate, which is why I think they didn't actually say it, is because this was the cognitive normal for him. And so I think it's another part of the pathological lying of the Democratic Party in the cover-up, is that they're like, no. This, she says one time thing. No, it wasn't. This is the guy that wasn't running the country. Somebody else was in the White House. And then they lied and covered it up. And now she's saying it only happened one time. I don't believe her for a moment.
Well, and in fact, listen to a reporter asking her about whether this had been going on for a long time. Give a listen.
Did you ever see signs that he was falling into cognitive decline?
No.
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 Truly.
No.
I mean, that's just totally insane. Everyone saw it. There was examples that you could actually give that were caught on tape. And then I go back to what she said. It was the worst I ever saw. I thought he was having a stroke, but I didn't do anything when he was having the stroke, and I never saw anything like this ever again. This is why I think so many Americans have distrust for politicians, and why you should even be asking more questions now about who the hell was running the country. Was it Joe Biden? I don't know.
And by the way, I'll say again, I am more forgiving of Jill Biden, of the spouse. But every Democrat aide knew that he was in massive mental decline, that he was not capable of doing the job. Every reporter knew that. ABC knew that. CBS knew that. NBC knew that. CNN knew that. MSNBC knew that. They all knew that.
And where were these questions, by the way, when the campaign was going on?
Right. Every Democrat senator, every Democrat House member, they all knew that. The 4 years Joe Biden was president, do you know how many times I spoke with him in person in those 4 years?
I'm going to guess 1 or 0.
0. Not a single time. That is weird. It is a regular part of the job of being a senator to talk to the president. When Obama was president, I talked to him regularly. When Trump is president, I talk to him sometimes every week or sometimes even every day. Last time I talked to Trump was 3 days ago. It is weird. And by the way, it was not just me. Almost every single Republican senator did not speak to him at all during his presidency. We would sit around at lunch and talk about how weird it was that the White House would not let us talk to the president. And understand, we all knew him. Joe was a man of the Senate for 40 plus years. So every one of us had a personal relationship with Joe Biden. And the fact that they wouldn't let him speak to us was a screaming alarm bell that his mental capacity is diminished so much that they couldn't let us see it. And it's why the debate was so high risk, because there you had the TV cameras going and you couldn't have an aide step in and save him. But, well, by the way, what did the Biden staff say about Jill Biden's comments about thinking he was having a stroke? Well, an Axios reporter said, quote, ex-Biden aides simply don't believe Jill Biden.
And there's your sign.
Well,
there's your sign.
No kidding. But I'll tell you, and this story links back to the story we started with. Number one, Democrats in the party and the media do not care about anything other than power. That sounds too harsh. But they were willing to have for 4 years and potentially for 8 years someone who was senile, who was unable to put together coherent thoughts as the commander-in-chief. Understand, Joe Biden could have pushed a button, launched our nukes, and annihilated mankind from the face of the planet.
Yep.
And yet Democrats say, you know what? If he's there, we get to run things. So, what does it matter if our enemies look at the commander-in-chief and think he's a addled old man who can't operate the TV remote control?
Yeah. That
level of cynicism, frankly, it's the same thought process that says, what does it matter if someone is a commie, Nazi, misogynist, racist? What does it matter? My party gets to stay in power, so that's good by me. There is, look, I think it is, number one, we keep, and by the way, Swalwell, they were fine. Someone's a repeat sexual predator. They were great with him until there was a political problem, and then with all three, they immediately jettison them and throw them out the back. I'm going to try to be restrained and say that is not the behavior of a party that gives a damn about principle.
Yeah. Yeah, great point. Finally, Senator, we have some breaking news as we are recording, and they're saying it's a regime rift. I'm going to read this headline for you. Iran's president reportedly submits resignation letter amid claims of deepening internal divisions. What does this mean? And that's all we have at this moment. I wish we had more. We don't. That's what we have at this moment. Some of this, by the time you listen to it, may have changed. But right now, that's what we've got.
So we don't know. We're recording this on Sunday. The news is breaking. I expect in the next pod we'll discuss more about it. But Iran's president resigning strikes me as a good thing. I have always said that a critical objective here should be regime collapse. The president resigning is a step in the right direction. Now, sitting here today, I don't know that whether that means the hardliners are prevailing or whether that means voices of sanity are prevailing. We'll learn more. We'll talk more. But as you know, I spoke with the president this week, spent about 20 minutes on the phone with him talking predominantly about Iran. And what I urged the president was hold the line, stand strong, no nukes, no nukes, no nukes. And the president adamantly agreed with me. We were on exactly the same page. So I'm hopeful this is a good development, but it's too early to tell. We will tell you more when we know more about it.
We'll do that Wednesday morning. Don't forget, hit that subscribe or auto download button, and please write us a 5-star review. If you want to watch the show, you can on YouTube as well. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Wednesday morning.